Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. Thanks to Shri Prabhupada and Shri Lila. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak something on Srimad Bhagavatam, even though I'm not qualified. I will speak something just to please the Vaishnavas and in of service to the Vaishnavas, and also to follow the instructions of our Srila Prabhupada and our Guru. So let me share the text that we'll be reading today. Let me know. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So we'll start with the text, Srimad Bhagavatam 3.21.13. So Shiruvacha Dushtam Bhatadyakhila Satvarashe Samsiddhyamatnoshtava Darshanamna Yadarshanam Janmabhir Idya Sadhi Asha Sate Yogino Rudharo Yoga. One more time. Rishiruvacha Dushtam Bhatadyakhila Satvarashe Samsiddhyamatnoshtava Darshanamna Yadarshanam Janmabhiritya Sadhi Ashashate Yogino Rudha Yoga. Rishiruvacha Dushtam Bhatadyakhila Satvarashe Samsiddhyamatnoshtava Tava darshanam yadarshanam janmabhiritya sadhi ashasate yogino rudha yoga. Synonyms: Rishivacha, the great sage said, Dushtam, is attained. Bata, Adya, now, Akila, all, Sattva, of goodness. Rashe, who are the reservoir. Samsiddhyam, the complete success. Akshno, of the two eyes, Tava, of you, Darshanat, from the sight, Na, by us, Yat, of whom, Darshanam, sight, Janmabhi, through births, Idya, O worshipable Lord, Sadhi, gradually elevated in position, Ashasate, aspire, Yogina, yogis, Rudha yoga, having obtained perfection in yoga. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Kardama said, O Supreme Worshipable Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of the sight of you, who are the reservoir of all existences. Through many successive births of deep meditation, advanced yogis aspire to see your transcendental form. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described here as the reservoir of all goodness and all pleasure. Unless one is situated in the mode of goodness, there is no real pleasure. Therefore, when one's body, mind, and activities are situated in the service of the Lord, one is on the highest perfectional state of goodness. Kardama Muni says, your lordship is the reservoir of all that can be understood by the nomenclature of goodness. And by your experience, and by our experiencing you face to face, the perfection of sight has now been attained. These statements are the pure devotional situation. For a devotee, the perfection of the senses is to engage in the service of the Lord. The sense of sight, when engaged in seeing the beauty of the Lord, is perfected. The power to hear, when engaged in hearing the glories of the Lord, is perfected. The power to taste, when one enjoys by eating prasada, is perfected. When all the senses engage in relationship with the personality of Godhead, one's perfection is technically called Bhakti Yoga, which entails detaching the senses from material indulgence and attaching them to the service of the Lord. When one is freed from all designated conditional life and fully engages in the service of the Lord, one's service is called Bhakti Yoga. Kardama Muni admits that seeing the Lord personally in Bhakti Yoga is the perfection of sight. The exalted perfection of seeing the Lord is not exaggerated by Kardama Muni. He gives evidence that those who are actually elevated in yoga aspire in its life after life to see this form of the personality of Godhead. He was not a fictitious yogi. Those who are actually on the advanced path aspire only to see the eternal form of the Lord. We'll do the prayers. ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपीश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृन्द हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak something from this transcendental literature of Srimad Bhagavatam. I am not qualified as I have spoken, but I will attempt to repeat what I've heard from the acharyas so that I can purify myself in this attempt and also to serve the Vaishnavas. So this chapter is about conversation between Manu and Kardama. So just to recap, Vidura is inquiring about Manu's dynasty from Maitreya. And this text that we're specifically reading today, Kardama had performed this great austerities for 10,000 years. And the Lord has finally given his darshan to him. And it talks about how Kardama Muni began his prayers to the Lord when he first saw the form of the Lord. So Kardama Muni says that his by seeing this Lord face to face, his eyes are successful, or the eyesight has been perfected. So in this translation, we can see that Kardama Muni is saying that great yogis, they aspire to see the form of the transcendental form of the Lord through many successive births of deep meditation. So, I was just contemplating on this word yogino arudha, which is stated in this in this verse, and it put me back to this Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 in Jnana Yoga, and in chapter 6, the Lord is explaining in text 3 and 4 specifically the two levels of this Ashtanga yoga. And it is said typically that this Ashtanga yoga is very difficult to perform in this age of Kali. So I was going to discuss what basically, the Ashtanga yoga is, and then the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. And then, also the results, the end results or end goal of these practices. And then really compare that to the Bhakti yoga process that Srila Prabhupada has given to us. So it brings us to achieve the goal, the Bhakti yoga process. It brings us to achieve this goal that many yogis try to achieve by performing such hard work and austerities. But, devotees who are following Bhakti yoga, they can very easily attain this. And, the end result is guaranteed path back home, back to Godhead. So in Ashtanga Yoga, as mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, there are two levels. And then the first level is called this Yoga Ruksha. And that is the beginning stage. In this beginning stage, the person performs the prescribed duties or Nishkam Karma Yoga because they're not able to just, worship the Lord. So they have to first just, do the prescribed duties. And this is the beginning stage of the elevation of the soul. And in this stage, one gradually cultivates detachment and they start then practicing the Ashtanga Yoga, doing different various asanas and the different breathing exercises, again, just to gradually purify this heart from the fruitive desires. And then the second stage after that is called the Arudha stage. Sorry, I'm under a little weather. And this is the advanced stage. And this is when one is completely purified of all the material desires and fruitive activities. So he can give up this Nishkam Karma Yoga and then practice this Ashtanga Yoga exclusively without any personal motivation. And then this person does not, at that point, this person does not act for any kind of sense gratification or engage in any fruitive activities. And so, as I said, the Ashtanga Yoga, right? I just wanted to really go in a deep little into what this Ashtanga Yoga is. We keep on hearing what this word is. So, just for my understanding, I wanted to talk about this specifically, is that the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are described in Patanjali Yoga Sutra book. And mainly this Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana Yoga, they're pretty much similar because they both require very intense practice of sense control and mind control. Of course, this is super painful in this age and in this, Kali Yuga. And it takes a very long time, right? As mentioned by Kardama Muni, that it takes multiple births for these yogis to attain this. And the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, the yama. So first is yama. And what yama means is the don'ts. They follow the regulations or prohibitions. So they don't do certain things because they want to practice this Ashtanga Yoga, right? The next part is the niyama. So yoga is the don'ts, and then niyama, so do's. So what to do. So we follow, what they follow the regulations and prescriptions. That's what they start doing after stopping the don'ts. Then third is the asana. So once they stop the don'ts, they do the do's, they perform some bodily exercises or the asanas. And then after they perform these asanas, then they start practicing pranayama. Pranayama is the breathing exercises. And then after breathing exercises, they go through pratyahara, or so they withdraw their senses from sense objects. And then after that, they do dharana. Dharana is fixing the mind on the Lord's form. So that's the beginning stage of fixing the mind. And then there's an intense fixing of the mind, and that's called dhyana stage. So that's the intensified meditation on the Lord. And then eventually they reach samadhi, or this complete absorption or trance. So basically it means that, after one learns to strictly follow the rules and regulations, he begins to practice asanas, or the sitting postures. And this is what people commonly call the Hatha Yoga. And while the asanas are being mastered, one begins pranayama, or the breathing exercises. And then this breathing is very deeply connected to the mind. So this pranayama, the breathing exercises, they really help control the mind. So when the mind is controlled, then the aspiring yogi advances to the practice of pratyahara. So they are able to then withdraw their senses from their sense objects. And then when he becomes detached, or when this yogi becomes detached, he practices dharana, then dhyana, and the different intensities. These are the different intensities of meditation. And then this meditation really then leads to this final stage, which is called the samadhi. And in samadhi, this mind and consciousness are fully absorbed on the absolute. So just showing the yoga ladder now that I wanted to bring up, just to have a better understanding of what we're. Okay, so this is the yoga ladder. And you see this, the jnani, like in jnana yoga, they're focusing, and then the end result they reach is the Brahman realization. Then in the jnana yoga also advances to Ashtanga yoga. And Ashtanga yoga, there's two different realizations that one can attain. One is the Brahman realization, or the other is the Paramatma realization. So again, these are they can go either way again. And eventually, by the mercy of the devotees, if these Paramatma realization yogis, they meet a devotee of the Lord, they eventually can start practicing Bhakti Yoga to get to this final, Bhagavan realization, which is the topmost realization. So we can see here that, the Gyanis, they focus on this Brahman, the impersonal, or the, all-pervading aspect of the Supreme. And the Patanjali or Stanga Yoga, they focus on the Paramatma, the localized aspect of the Supreme, who's situated within the heart. And Bhakti Yogis, they focus on Krishna and the Supreme Lord with all his opulences, one who is like the spiritual form composed of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So Satchit Anand. So now I'll stop sharing this. So now we can see that, Prabhupada has given this process of following this Bhakti Yoga. And in Bhagavad Gita, when we go back to chapter 12, there's, Krishna has given very different, so many different options to gradually elevate our consciousness and eventually attain that love for him, which is the end result of the human life. So he has given us in chapter 12, from text 8 through 12, if we read that. So in the first text, 8, he says that engage everything in me. So engage your mind and intelligence in me, and then you live at me. So this is the purest devotional service, the pure devotional service, right? And then what if I say that, okay, I'm not there yet. I cannot, engage fully my mind and intelligence on Krishna. So what should I do? So then in Krishna, he's so merciful. So he gives this option. Then, he says in text 9, that if you can't, fix your mind and intelligence upon me, then regulate them or follow regulatory principles. So then we start practicing the sadhana bhakti. So let's say someone is not able to practice this sadhana bhakti, so they can't focus, they can engage their mind and intelligence in Krishna. They can't do sadhana bhakti. So then Krishna says in text 10 that engage yourself in some services. So perform some services for Krishna. And this will eventually clean one's heart. And then after that, Krishna says, if you still can't do this, then, do some philanthropic work or try to give up your results and try to be detached from your work. And this, this is not spiritual or it's not bhakti, but it is something to begin practicing some detachment from our fruitive results. And then in text 12, he says that if you can't do any of these things, then, just sit and study and cultivate knowledge, cultivate this knowledge about me. So eventually these things will gradually, they're there to purify our consciousness and reach this goal of, love of Godhead. And note these things are, if we really think about this, these things are really simple to follow. I know on Saturday, in Srimad Bhagavatam class, Srimad Prabhu had said that in the beginning, when the sadhaka practices these regulatory principles, it seems like such a big austerity. But over some time, when we start practicing these austerity, it doesn't even now. We don't even feel like we're doing any kind of austerities because this is such a norm and natural thing for us to do. It's harder to go back, even to think to go back to that life that we were before Krishna consciousness. So, this is the beauty of devotional service, that it is very simple. When you start practicing, it may seem very hard in the beginning because our minds are conditioned and we're very complex. So when we start practicing, eventually, Krishna will give us intelligence to follow this process. And then by his mercy, when we start following this process, everything becomes really simple. So Kardama Muni here, he has performed this austerity for 10,000 years. And now he says that, he's achieved this perfection of his eyes, or the sight of perfection of the sight has been achieved because he's seen the Lord face to face. So I was just thinking, we're so fortunate that even we can follow the process of Srila Prabhupada, just following this process of Srila Prabhupada, in one lifetime. Our lifespan is like, maximum 100 years. But mostly it's like even less than 100 years for some of us, right? So we can, even in that time frame, we can achieve the perfection of life. So it's just very, profound to really think deeply about this process that Prabhupada has given us. And in this month of Kartik, let's just try to perform this devotional service with a really grateful heart to our acharyas and our Guru Vargas and Srila Prabhupada, who's bestowed us, so much mercy and blessings just in this one lifetime, in this short lifetime. So when we have this grateful heart, our sadhana will not feel dry. When it is when we forget that our sadhana, we need to offer our sadhana to Krishna. And then, it doesn't become burdensome. Otherwise, it becomes very burdensome when we forget to offer it to Krishna. And then it becomes like, I have to follow this. I have to do this. And then it starts being dry. So we need to always offer our sadhana to Krishna and our Guru and Srila Prabhupada with a grateful heart. And then, so with this, I would like to end. I'm sorry for any mistakes that I may have committed, and I beg your forgiveness. We can move on with our discussions. If anyone has any realizations or any corrections, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mathaji. I think the last point really touched. I mean, you mentioned about how austerity, which is not offered to the Lord, the parampara, is going to be a burden on us. Right? It's going to be, yeah, I have to do this. I mean, it's very nicely you concluded that.
So yeah, that's something that I heard, and I was just thinking, meditating, like, it's so, we a lot of people feel, myself even, when I start just doing things and forgetting that I'm offering this to Krishna and Gurus and Prabhupada, then it starts feeling dry. So when we start offering this to Krishna, it won't feel dry. So it's mainly for really reminding myself of Krishna. And if there's no more realization or discussions, we can conclude, Prabhu.
Okay, Mathaji.
Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. That's how Shri Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.